Darren Campbell with Confident Home Solutions, licensed general contractor, builder, remodeler in North Carolina. This is part 2 to that fence and the neighbor issue video. Well, Harley was bringing up that there's some things that we hadn't included in that original story that I probably should bring up. I was like, you know what, I'll make a new video altogether and bring up a couple other clients. Not so much the client, but what happened in there. But I want to do a back set to actually and bring people up to speed as to what happened with that fence video. So we had an older fella that dementia started settling in. He'd done pretty well in life, but he was putting his neighbors through it. I mean, so we got a fence out there. The daughter calls me up, hey, we got to keep daddy off this fence. And she suggests to add pickets on the side, because anyone that knows, you typically put the nice side of the fence towards your neighbors, and so the framing side goes towards you. Well, there's enough of a board on the framing side that he could step on. So by us adding the pickets, he had nothing to step on. All right, so that brought you up to speed with that video. Now, we had a short window of time because she took him out and she's like, hey, you got X amount of time. You got to have this thing wrapped up. And she's like, you better not be on this property, because I even know he loves you guys. He's going to kill you. So pretty much, I think I pretty much explained it there. So, but I was telling Harley that we got some comments on that videos, and he says, hey, did you bring up about the other neighbor? And I was like, oh no, I forgot about that. I totally forgot about that. So I'm going to tell you about it. So on the other side of the property is, this is a pretty nice neighborhood, but is a middle-aged couple, and we were working. I don't know what we were working on in the house at that point, but we had a cloud appear out of literally nowhere. I saw the black cloud. I hit a raindrop, and I was like, we're in trouble. I was like, we had all our tools out. We had materials that I was worried about getting rained on. And so we had 3 of us booking it, running back and forth on the other side of the house, trying to get everything taken care of before the rain started ruining everything. So we're yelling at each other due to how far we're away from each other. And all of a sudden, she opens the front door to her house. This little petite blonde, 30, 35-year-old woman steps out and starts screaming at us, I can't handle it. I can't handle it. And I'm like, I'm running with my tools and trying to get it to the trailer. And I hit the brakes. I'm like, what can't she handle? And then I was like, oh, she thinks we're being too loud. Well, then she realized what was happening, that the rain was about ready to set in and that we were about ready to get downpoured. And she was just like, she thought the neighbor was yelling out there. So apparently he different times would go out there and just yell at the side of her house. And you know how Homer Simpson slowly shrinks back into the bush? That was exactly what she was. So I need to tell you about the shrub on that same piece of property. All right, here's number 2. So talking about the same gentleman, the backside of his property, on a totally separate job. We've worked for this fella quite a few different times. So, but let me see. This would have been, I cannot remember if it was before we got yelled at by the neighbor or not. Either way. So there was a tree in his backyard, and that we had to take a couple branches off for, I think it was for laser or string. Oh no, I remember. It was actually so we could go through there to work. It was too difficult for us to do the work with those 2 branches there. I'm actually remembering it right now. So we told them in the very beginning, depending upon the layout, they may have to be trimmed back. And they were like, no, it didn't matter. We'll just address that when it comes to it. Well, we were there. So I went up, knocked on the door, told the homeowner, we're going to have to trim a couple of them. He's like, real lighthearted. He says, cut it down. He says, I hate that tree anyways. Well, I'm not cutting it down. It was only a 10-foot tree. And it was one of those trees that had spikes, and we had already taken a ratchet and put around the tree and balled it all up, or tightened it up tight. So trying to avoid doing what we needed, eventually had to do, but we still couldn't. I had to go up there and knock on the door. He told me to cut it down, and as I'm walking off the deck, I'm like, nah, I'm not cutting it down, just taking a couple branches off. Now the branches were facing the neighbor. He couldn't even see it from inside the house. So I said, you know what, I'll give it a little bit. So I got preoccupied with something else, and so about 45 minutes, hour later, he comes out and he's talking with us. And as I'm talking with him, he says, you haven't cut the tree down yet. And I was like, no. I says, I'm about ready to. Got the saw right there. He's like, oh, well, I'll go back in and get the saw myself, cut it down. And I was like, no. I says, we only need these couple branches. Like, well, just do it. So, he was all friendly. I enjoyed listening to his stories. So he proceeds to head back in the house. We'd already cut one of the branches off as he was going up the deck. And by the time he shut the door, we cut the second branch. So the door comes flying back open. His arms up, and he's like, what are you doing? You've ruined my life. You've ruined my backyard. All right, so Harley and I and Marshall, we're all like, what? So a few seconds later, Daddy says that you've ruined his life. What's going on over there? And so I proceed to have to tell his daughter, that I had instructed him that we needed to remove a couple branches. She remembered this discussion. So then we had a plan as to how to remedy this. So when we went in, the video of us going in and putting those fence pickets on, we'd already done multiple jobs with this gentleman. So we already knew that he could be friend and foe almost at the same time. So I'm not making fun of him, but the whole situation. All right. I'm going to make more videos of this. We got so many good stories to tell about even stupid things that we've done. Okay, so the last one. We were working at this law office. Really fast-paced law office. And we'd already taken care of the outside. And Harley and I we had so many different jobs going on the inside that we were waiting for stuff to dry. And we had to keep things moving around, working around the different secretaries, the different attorneys, just everything. So we had I want to say we maybe had 12 different jobs going on inside. There's just two of us on that job. So there was one particular thing that's actually two that stood out in that job, but one, this gentleman came in when I was actually working in where the receptionist was, and she kind of did a dual role. Not only did she weed out potential clients, she picked actually who they were going to take on somewhat. She was a receptionist, so she did, kind of a dual role there. So I was working on one of the repairs in that room, and he was trying to get them to take him on as a client. So that was the first time I was introduced to this fella. So we ended up later that day. I was working in the lobby, and when he came back in, he says, "So where is everybody?" And I says, "Well, she'll be right back. I mean, this place has a lot of people in and out of it, and I mean, it's pretty crazy. It really is." So I says, "Well, she'll be right back." And he says, well, I could see him moving around. I brought up, I said, "She'll be right back." I says, "It's good. I'm 12 to 15 feet up in the air." Either way, so he starts telling me everything. And I was like, oh, come on. I had nowhere to go. So he's laying it all out. He's confessing to, I don't want to say confess. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. Because at the very end, he's like, he even knew it too, because he says, everyone has skeletons in their closet. Yeah. So later that day, we're sitting down to have lunch, and I'm talking to Harley, and Harley's like, hey, he says, got cornered by a guy in the back of one of the law offices, and he started telling me everything about his life. And I says, I know exactly who you're talking about. I says, I wasn't expecting that. So that was funny. I'm not going to go into details. I don't think anybody got hurt, so either way. The other thing is, we learned that do not put your tools inside of an office with an attorney that practices, or defends felony convictions, because we found out that their office gets locked all the time and they don't care. You're not getting your tools back for a little while. He was pretty cool, but at first, I mean, he didn't know me. Yeah, they knew us at the end, and they started really trusting us. But I mean, and the only reason why we got that job is because of it was a referral, and they were very particular as to who they let in there, because I mean, we were in and around all that stuff, and my personality, I don't want to know this stuff. I don't. That's leave me out of it. Make my money, gone. But that was interesting. We had not only did we had a confession, we had our tools locked up at that job. So more than one time. So, all right, we're out.